afternoon, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. John Kelly Profiler here, and welcome to a very sad show and a very sad day. It's the 1 year anniversary of the mass murder that took place up in Moscow, Idaho, at Idaho University. Very upsetting, to say the least. I want to send our sympathies and condolences out to the victims and their families. Kelly Calvez, Madison Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. Okay, God bless them. God bless their families and friends. This was a very evil act that took place there. And I want to bring out that Bryan Kohberger, who I will be talking about here today, is totally innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. There's no question about it. He's totally innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. What I'm trying to find out, I'd like some feedback from you guys. I know what my thoughts are, and I'm going to express them to you now, but I'd like some feedback from you guys on what you think Bryan Kohberger's alibi or lie is going to be. And that's what our show's called today, Alibis and Lies, right? What his alibis or lies are going to be if he's trying to get the DNA out of that room. His DNA is where his DNA should not be, and that's in a room, where there's some dead women, okay? Now, he's trying to get the DNA thrown out of court completely right now, that it wasn't collected right, or chain of custody, or wherever the hell he's going with his defense arguments, but they're not going to work. And there's no doubt in my mind that the FBI dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and a great job was done by all law enforcement in that case up there. There's no question about it. And they hopped on Bryan Kohberger right away. Again, innocent till proven guilty in a court of law. But the question I have, and what I would like your feedback on, are what's going to be his excuses? What will he come up with again? I mean, his DNA was found on a knife sheath, which is believed to have held the murder weapon, the knife that cut up all these young people. One guy and three girls. Okay, and they were chopped up pretty good with this knife. And the knife was never found, but the sheath was found. Okay, and what I want to show you is, here we have a knife. So we take the knife out. So then what we're left with is the sheath, okay? Well, the whole sheath, from what law enforcement says, what we can believe, there was no fingerprints found in the room is what they're stating. So I believe there was no fingerprints found on this knife sheath. But if we look at the tab here, supposedly this is where DNA was found, and this DNA led back to Bryan Kohberger, okay? So I could see how somebody could not even, look how small this is, okay? Look how small this is. So I could understand how somebody could think, boy, I wiped that knife sheet down and there's nothing on there. I've left no proof and I'm good to go. Let me get out of here. But the bottom line is, he forgot to clean inside or wipe out this button again on this knife sheet, and then whoever the killer is, bottom line, they're in big trouble because their DNA was found. Now, of course, Bryan Kohberger will turn around and say, that's not my DNA. That'll be his excuse. But I'm wondering what you think some of his excuses could be, or alibis could be. The alibi thing, we throw it out the window, right? I mean, he said he was in a car all alone driving around. Well, there's nobody there to alibi him. I mean, I think the judge asked him, who saw you? He said, nobody, just driving along alone, middle of the night or whatever. Did that normally, like to do that, okay? Just drive around by himself. But unfortunately, if you don't see anybody, how do you have an alibi? You can't alibi yourself. You know what I'm saying? There's got to be some kind of proof, some kind of documentation, okay? Now, again, the DNA coming up on the knife sheath, really causes a problem. So what are his excuses going to be? I'm thinking he's probably going to go and turn around and say, well, the knife sheath is someone else's. I like those kinds of knives. I have bought some of those knives in the past, which they have a history of. He has a history of that. So, I like buying them. I like looking at them. And I've looked at different ones from different people, at campus or whatever. And of course, if I've looked at it, I've had to open it and touch it and feel it and see how well it was, and making sure there were no problems with it, or I couldn't buy it. I mean, I had to inspect it first before I could buy it. Maybe that's how my DNA got on there. Maybe that's how my DNA got on somebody else's knife sheet, the killer's knife sheet. Maybe that's how my DNA got on the killer's knife sheet. Well, the problem is, like I said earlier, there's no fingerprints. So if there's no fingerprints, but Mr. Kohberger, it's your DNA, I mean, how do we square that away? How do we square that away? If you were not in that house at that time and there was nobody else's fingerprints found, okay, on that knife sheet, or, nobody else's DNA, but your DNA. Don't you think if somebody had that knife sheet, they would have cleaned it really good, which it was. There was no fingerprints from what we know of. But obviously, they did leave some DNA there. And that happens to be your DNA, okay? So I want to see what he has to say about that. I'd consider Kohberger, if he is guilty, only if he's found guilty, if he, did the deed, then I got to consider him a mass murderer at this point in time. I mean, I'm just not going to call him a killer or a fantasy killer or, any kind of, rageful murder. I'm going to call him a mass murderer, and rage is a good word to have in there, because I think he was enraged. Most mass murderers are enraged. There's usually a lot of negative stuff that goes on in their life, and they accumulate this internal rage, this internal anger, which eventually explodes and blows up and is misdirected on a lot of other people. And leading up to something like that, where you have that type of an attack, okay, they're triggered by some kind of event, some kind of a major event they believe is a major event in their life, which really causes them to explode. All right. And that's usually centered around the loss of a job or a relationship. All right. Usually we find that in the mix somewhere. Okay. Something triggered and set them off. Something lit the fuse. Okay. For example, the recent Maine mass shooter. All right. Robert Card. He lost his girlfriend. Okay. Maybe a month or two before he went, bonkers and exploded and killed everybody in the pool room and the bowling alley, the bar. I mean, he just went ballistic. But also, he lost his job or a little later than that. Then he lost his girlfriend. Okay, so he not only lost his girlfriend, he lost his job as well. So those were the triggers. And I guess the job, was the straw that broke the camel's back. And off he went on a murderous rage, okay? Bryan Kohberger lost the job as well, but not before the murders. But before the murders, they were starting to look into him, and he was brought up in front of class for being very perfectionistic, very dogmented, if you will, in grading the students' work. I mean, a really tough grader, kind of a demanding person, demanding maybe perfectionism from the students, but they felt he was an extremely harsh grader, okay? And I think that really set the stage for this whole thing, because the professor made him get up in front of the class, okay? Now, at this point in time, he's an assistant teacher, remember, for this professor. So the professor got the complaints from the students, Professor made him stand up in front of the class and listen to the complaints from the class. Now, for a guy like Mr. Kohberger, and knowing a little bit about his personality as I do, I really believe that was very, very humiliating, and to Mr. Kohberger, probably insulting that he was going to be chastised by people in his class who he felt were nowhere near his peers. I think there's a lot of narcissism here, okay? And one thing we know about narcissists, what don't they like to be, or what are they never? They're never wrong, right? They're never wrong, and they don't like the idea of being criticized and especially put on the spot in front of a whole group of people. This is pretty humiliating. In fact, people who he believes aren't even his peers. So anyway, he got cited for, being hard and not being able to get along with the students. And eventually, he kept getting intervened on because the professor or even administration itself wanted to see how he was coming along with his progress after the first intervention. Was he doing better? Was he becoming a better professor, a better person in class? Was he showing the students, some respect, some value, not lack of respect, okay? Or lack of value as students. And eventually, I think this got to him and caused him to go ballistic, because right after the murders, not too long after the murders, he received a letter where it was more or less firing him, okay, as an assistant teacher because of his lack of professionalism. Okay, they were focusing on his professionalism and lack of it in the classroom. Now that, and that, may have happened after the murders when he got the final blow, the final message, the letter. But leading up to the murders, he was consistently being intervened on by the professor and others at the school to see what kind of job he was doing and if he was making progress in his professionalism, which in the bottom line at the end of the story, he was not. And I think he saw that coming, and I think he was very, very upset with that. And I think that's, when he went ballistic. The other thing you have to also understand, from what we understand, is that he also had some very harsh comments on grading to the students, not only the males, but especially the females. He was especially more harsh with his grading comments to females. This is what we understand. Again, we'll see. Time will tell. He's innocent until proven guilty, like I've said a couple of times here. And until he has his trial, he's innocent until proven guilty. Bottom line, I think he's in a world of hurt, and he's going to have to come up with some real alibis and excuses. And we'd like you guys to give us your comments on what you think his alibis and excuses should be, or might be, right? He's got to come up with some. How did his DNA end up in the room on a knife sheet of a murder weapon, they believe, that killed two beautiful girls, right? You better come up with something real fast. All righty. Thank you so much for putting up with me today. I'm a little off and on, but I really appreciate your time. Can't thank you enough for all your subscriptions. Please continue to subscribe. We love your comments. Let us know what you're thinking about this, what you think some alibis and excuses might be. And most importantly, make it a great day today. Stay safe out there. With a very violent world we live in. Until next time, take care and God bless.